Hey, how's everybody doing? Matt McNeil coming to you from the garage. I am currently dwelling a tongue for these guys. I'm sure you're sick of seeing them. They are all over my house. I'm sure my wife is also sick of seeing them. But, one of the things that we talked about a while back was the whole idea of mixing in some flocking with the latex, and that works out great. If you haven't seen that video, basically, this is what comes out of the mold. And this is without any kind of cleanup or paint or anything like that. So you sort of can disregard that white powdery look. And if you were to clean this off, it's a pretty great, like literally right out of the mold, clean it off, maybe put a wash of paint on it, and a little 5-minute epoxy or E6000, and you have a fantastic tongue. But anyway, so I'm pouring these guys because I got to make tongues for each one of these blanks. Those blanks over there. So anyway, that's what I'm doing here. And in the process of this, of course, I can't leave well enough alone. And I don't know if you guys remember a while back, I mixed some flocking in with latex and just just poured a half Evil Ed. And I thought it was a pretty good attempt. This mask is holding up really pretty well. My fear for these would be that maybe the flocking could undermine the latex a little bit, because each fiber of flocking, which is this stuff, is like a little polyester strand, which means that air could get around it inside, which could make the latex sort of internally porous, but I guess maybe foam latex is internally porous. Anyway, this is a real quick paint up, and I've been literally throwing it around the garage here, and so some of the paint is coming off and gotten other paint on it and all of that stuff. But I just wanted to give it the old college try and see how long it would last and all of that stuff. And in the meantime, because I'm pouring these tongues, I decided that maybe I would try something a little different with a jerry. So I poured the front half of this jerry, and I painted in red flocking where if I were painting this, where I would concentrate some red. I think I probably, if I were to do this again, put a little more in the cheeks. And so anyway, it's a learning experience, something just kind of give a shot to. And when I base coat these guys over here out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to base coat this guy as well and see if I'm just spinning my wheels. I may find that that red that's in there is nonsensical and doesn't do me any favors, or I may find that it gives me just an added dimension, organic, kind of under the skin, red burst capillary look, particularly in the ear area. I don't know if you guys have trouble painting ears, but I always find that ears are really hard to paint. Ears, don't underestimate how red people's ears are. It's amazing. Go on the internet and look it up. People have very red ears. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes they do. And it's always in these kind of nooks and crannies, and getting a airbrush in there is tough. So I thought maybe if I did this, when I base these guys out, this red would show through and kind of look cool. Same thing with the interior of the mouth, I wish this would focus, the lips, and even the interior corners of the eyes and stuff like that. So anyway, just an experiment. This is uneven, I know. I'm sure people are going to be like, hey, I could see where you brushed it in. Yes, you can. So anyway, there it is. Just giving it a shot. And then, maybe the thing to do, what I'll do is I'll take this guy and I'll shred him up and make a zombie out of him with one of my skull masks, because I always like taking facial features off of these random pores and making zombies, sort of like a kit bash zombie out of these guys. So anyway, there you go. That's what's going on there. But that's not even why I'm making this video. The reason I'm making this video is because I just had this sort of harebrained idea. This is UV resin, clear. I think you use it for making jewelry and whatnot. Now, I know that a lot of you guys know that I use 3D printers, and mostly the resin I buy for that is white. You can buy clear, and it may in fact be this exact stuff. I don't know. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I thought if this stuff, UV resin, which means that it is cured with a UV light, right? That's really all that 3D printers are. UV light cures them. That maybe you could use it to do things like gloss eyeballs or teeth, gums, that kind of stuff. Now, the really sad part about this video is I made like a whole video where I was trying all these things, and then I looked down and realized I wasn't recording anymore. So I've already tried a bunch of this stuff, and I want to just sort of show you what I came up with. So one of the things the first thing that I did was I took an eyeball blank that I'm no longer using. This was just a temporary test eye that I was using as placeholders before I got hold of these 4 seal eyes from Tim, which are fantastic. So do not judge this eye versus that eye, because Tim does that for a living. And I do this for fun. So anyway, so this was just a really rough paint. I was, again, just testing colors, skin palette stuff, that kind of thing. So anyway, and I thought, well, maybe you could take that 3D resin, or not 3D resin, this jewelry resin, slather a little bit onto an eyeball like this and cure it very quickly. And sure enough, you can. It looks pretty doggone glossy to me. This did not start glossy at all. It actually was matte finish, like completely dry paint, acrylic paint matte finish, like that. I mean, it was dull, dull, dull. And so I think that it did a pretty good job. The one question that I have is, because I touched the black part, and you can maybe I just have garbage on my fingers, but it still feels a little bit sticky, and that could be this flashlight. This is both Amazon garbage that I just bought. Hey, I need a UV flashlight, and I really didn't do any research, because that's what I'm doing now. I'm checking stuff out. So anyway, I think it works out pretty great. And, the other thing about UV is the sun is UV. And a lot of times with 3D prints, teeth and all of that stuff, they'll tell you just set it outside in the sun for, an hour or so, and it'll completely cure. So maybe this would completely cure if I took it outside. I don't know whether the flashlight is just not quite the right wavelength. But it's not wet. It's just, the one thing that you don't want to do is do an eyeball like this and accidentally touch it with your brush or your finger and end up with, ruining your gloss. Because 5-minute epoxy thinned with alcohol works out awesome. The one thing that's really kind of cool about this is you can cure it basically immediately. So my second test was to see about what would happen if I were to drip this out of the nozzle and cure it as it was dripping, like drool or tears or something like that, right? And it works. Oh, I got a little bit of red on it. Got a little bit of red. And so that red wasn't there before. But it made a really nice little... Now, it does drip, and as it's sort of like an icicle, as an icicle kind of drips down, you get drops that fall off of it, but at the same time, it's curing thinner layers, and it kind of built this, and it was pretty quickly, built this sort of drool drop. So that worked out really great. And for some reason, this cured faster than that, which I'm still not quite sure why. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but okay. But yeah, and it is very, very strong. Very, very strong. Like, really strong. And not brittle, not particularly brittle. Now, over time, will it become brittle? I don't know. It's not rubbery at all. Not at all. I thought that it might have a little flex to it. Not even a little bit. So know that when you're using this kind of stuff. Okay, so then the next idea that I had was, well, since it's not flexible, will it stick to latex? So I took this piece of latex and I put a little drop of it on there. And here, I'll show you, actually. We'll do one, because you should see how quickly this stuff cures and how it works. So I take a little bit of latex. I'm going to put a little drop of UV resin on there. And then I take this flashlight and I'm going to shine it right on there. All right. And it doesn't really take much more than that. It's probably done. Let me see. Yeah. So it's done. Looks great, like a bead of water on latex. However, I will tell you that it absolutely does not stick to latex. As you can see, it peels right up. So if you were to do this I suppose you could glue it on after the fact with some 5-minute epoxy, but if that's the case, why wouldn't you use 5-minute epoxy to begin with? So I would not recommend using this on latex directly and expecting it to stick, right? So then I grabbed this piece of 3D printed resin that I made in 3D printer, and I put a drop on here, and I cured it. And let me tell you something, that ain't going anywhere. So that brings me back to our teeth and eyeballs. So good for eyeballs, bad for latex. How about teeth? Well, that means to me that if I have 3D resin teeth, which these guys all do, that I would be able to use those or use this in order to create a gloss. And what it also allows you to do is not, the one thing about 3D or 5-minute epoxy is it settles. So you really have to like know that if you put it on something, it can pool in places that you don't want it to and that kind of stuff. Well, if I can make this stuff set quickly with a flashlight or a Halloween party light, right, a black light, same idea, then I can keep it from pooling. And I might be able to control it, which means that I can make sure that the teeth stay cleaner. And, you know, like when I'm doing these, I'm constantly brushing that 5-minute epoxy so that not only does the epoxy not pool on the actual teeth, but teeth have a different level of glossiness than, say, a tongue or something that's fleshy. The enamel on your teeth just is not as glossy. So I think that this could be a really cool way to control how and where that stuff glosses. Now, if you get it on the latex, don't expect it to stick. 5-minute epoxy does a really good job on latex. This, on the other hand, particularly if you mix 5-minute epoxy with, and this is the 5-minute epoxy I use, if you mix it with alcohol, it makes it even rubberier, and it slows down the set time. So you have to be ready for that. Thins it, slows it down, and makes it rubberier in a good way. But if you want something to set quick on a hard surface, this is pretty great. So then I thought, well, what would happen if I took some of this 5-minute epoxy, or not epoxy, UV resin, and mixed it with my flocking, right? So that's flocking. It's called Cardinal is the color that I use because it's a dark red. And then I mixed it together and I put it right here. And guess what? Fantastic, right? Super good. It's still a little greasy, but really, really, really good. Hard as a rock. You still have that kind of breakup in there, which is cool, which adds depth. So it makes me think that maybe in painting the gums on these teeth for Jerry, so like these teeth, I've already done like a little bit of a yellow wash on them. And then I come back and I paint the gums. And I've been painting them with a little bit of paint and then covering them that up with 5-minute epoxy with flocking mixed in. Well, I wonder whether this UV resin might be a better way to control the paint on these, because I can push it around until I'm ready to make it set, and then I can hit it, make it set. I don't have to worry about it drying on me while I'm pushing it around or thickening up or any of that stuff. So I may take a set of these and give that the old college try and see what happens. So that was a great experiment. Now, then my next thought was, well, if that's the case, why wouldn't I take some epoxy pigment, mix it in with my UV resin, because it works out great with the 5-minute epoxy, and maybe with a little flocking and see what happens. Well, this is what happened. It did not cure very well at all. It looks awesome. I mean, it looks really gross, actually. It looks like a piece of something, little piece of tongue or something. And but it didn't cure the same, not in a good way at all. So I would not suggest mixing in 5-minute epoxy, or not a 5-minute epoxy, but epoxy pigment with your UV resin. It didn't work out. So anyway, there you go. I'm still kind of messing around with this stuff, seeing what I can and can't do with it. I'm obviously not going to use it on anybody's Jerry until I fully vetted it and what it's good for. But I thought maybe some of you guys may have either thought about it, used it before, have some insight as to what works well and what doesn't work well. But to me, it seems like eyes and teeth, as long as they're resin, are a good idea. Anything that's latex, not going to work. So 5-minute epoxy, you have not lost your job, but you may end up getting some reinforcement in the gloss department, particularly on resin bits and pieces. So there you go. I hope everybody's having a good night. I thought you guys might find that interesting, and we'll talk to you soon.